Hello, everyone. Good evening to everyone in the UK and good morning to everyone tuned in on New Zealand. Today, we have an exclusive event with two outstanding and prominent MPs in their respected countries. We have Ranil Jayawardena, the UK International Minister for Trade, and we have Simon Bridges, the former leader of the National Party. It's an honor to be hosting this event. I'll start with Simon. How are you and how is New Zealand?
I'm really good, Sunil. It's great to be with you and the Minister, with Ranil. Over here, it's a very nice day. Remember, of course, it's our morning and your evening, and so I've got a big day ahead. And I think we look with some envy across at you because from an opposition perspective, I'm in Her Majesty's loyal opposition over here. We see your relative freedoms and ability to go to the pub and travel and do some of these things which are a bit more restrictive over here at this time. So greetings, it's good to be with you.
It's fantastic to have you again, Simon. One thing to note for all of our listeners and viewers, both Simon and Ranil are patrons of Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, so it's great to have you both here. Ranil, as I'm sure many people are aware, you've been super busy getting a number of different trade deals. It is clearly doing a fantastic job there, and it almost seems every day we're agreeing new deals with different countries or at least building closer ties. Are you surprised at how many deals we've been able to achieve in such a short space of time?
Well, first of all, Sunil, thank you very much for organising this. It's great to be with Considered Friends of the Commonwealth once again. Simon, great to be on the call with you as well. And though it is your morning, it is my evening, so I must confess that I have a small glass of beer. I don't expect you to join me for this session as we, I think, just relax and speak amongst friends. All of us believe in the Conservative values that our parties share, but also all of us believe in the strength of our Commonwealth friendships and indeed brotherhood. And long may that continue, and long may this organisation prosper. And in fact, I mean, in respect to your question, Sunil, I think we very easily forget in the United Kingdom just how much we have to offer. We are the world's fifth largest economy. We're the world's second largest services exporter. And it's no wonder that, given the economic strengths and the skills that our people have and the great products that we export around the world, that we have been able to secure these deals. And of course, there's been a hell of a lot of work that's gone in to making that possible. And it's a great team effort, working with all of the ministers past and present that I've had the privilege to work with as the surviving trade minister after the reshuffle here in September, but also working with the officials at DIT who do a great job at keeping the work moving in between ministerial meetings and adjusting to ministerial priorities. And together, we have, as a Conservative government, since Boris took office in July 2019, we have turned that tanker around, and global Britain has set sail for the world. Finally, this is what Brexit was all about. Many of us thought it was possible, and the old deal under the previous administration wouldn't have allowed us, for example, to secure a deal with New Zealand, which I'm sure we will come on to in a bit. But we have been working very hard in the last couple of years, despite COVID, to agree trade deals now with 70 countries, 70, plus the EU, and that covers trade worth £766 billion, which in a COVID year where trade was depressed and it was more difficult to boost output, is a phenomenal result. So I think it's fair to say that no other nation has secured so many trade deals with so many of her friends in such a short space of time. And I'm confident, Sunil, that this is just the beginning.
I think it's interesting that we obviously discussed, and Renaud, you mentioned the New Zealand trader, which we will definitely be talking about in some detail. I want to pass over to you, Simon, because what's it been like an outsider viewing Britain in the last few years? Because obviously you would have seen the referendum in 2016, probably had a different perception of what's going on maybe to many people here, and now you've heard Ranil, and you've probably seen the trade deals that we've agreed in the last year or so. What's it been like in terms of New Zealanders thinking about what's going on with Britain?
I think it's very exciting, and we will come to it, but just as one brief comment, if we think about the New Zealand UK or UK New Zealand free trade agreement, it's great to see Britain walking that talk, in fact running, as Ranil is saying, with the number of agreements when it comes to that a very alluring idea of a global Britain. I can tell you in New Zealand, when we were in government, the National Party, the equivalent of the Conservative Party, and still today, the media, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the media as a generalization will have a view: Trump bad, Brexit bad, and that there will be some sense of that. I wasn't in that camp. I've always been clear, actually, that for a bunch of reasons, there were some very interesting and important things that could come out of Brexit. And I made the point, and you might have seen it, Sunil, you're one of my, you and I are firm friends and like each other's things on Twitter. I had a tweet a little while ago, well, actually, I think it was the day of the UK-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, that said, actually, for all that can be said about Brexit, this is a really good, Brexit has been a very good thing for New Zealand, because Ranil, if I can say so, and perhaps it's slightly inelegant, it's turned you into a much more motivated date, and you were there and going out there, and I believe, actually, return to one of the points I made. It won't be just talk; it will be a much more global Britain, which for New Zealand is, after a long time of a Britain that's been very much EU focused, will be a very exciting, and more than exciting, a very profitable in every sense of that word event for New Zealand.
I think that leads quite well to discussing, but I know, Simon, we've briefly discussed this in the past. Do you feel in some ways, maybe prior to Brexit, prior to Boris Johnson in office, that New Zealand, probably Australia in a similar category, were often neglected? I was recently actually at Party Conference, where I think there was somebody who discussed how we had done more trips to, I think, Slovenia than we had done to Australia in the last 12 years. So is that a perception in New Zealand as well?
It's my perception, and I just want to say to Ranil, I'm a firm, confirmed Anglophile. You wouldn't tell it from my thick Kiwi twang, but 3 of my 4 grandparents are from the United Kingdom, at least in terms of their forebears and their ancestry. I can trace my history back there, many hundreds of years, including my Maori whakapapa, as we say over here, or heritage. And so, the idea of the UK is very important to me. And so when I was a Minister of the Crown in New Zealand, and would not regularly, but every so often traipse the long flights, 24, 27 hours in the year to get to the United Kingdom, it was with disappointment that we would meet with ministers, and there was very much a sense that the focus was on the EU and not more globally. It's exciting to see that has changed, and that's not to say, as I'm sure Ranil knows 500 times more than I do, that the EU is still very important to the UK, to New Zealand. We're working hard, by the way, to get an FTA almost as good as our UK one with them. But it is to say that that more global outlook is very very important, and I think that is a change.
Talking of sort of New Zealand, UK, sticking to that top there, I think it's probably best that we mention the thing that most people are probably interested in, which is the New Zealand UK trade deal. Ranil, you obviously were involved in that process and probably have some really good insights in terms of that trade deal. What was it like being involved in the team and getting that over the line?
Well, clearly great team effort, and my now former colleague, Greg Hands, and of course Liz Truss did a great amount of work as well, and they should be saluted and commended for their efforts. It's a great sense of success and a great delight that perhaps if I can extend the analogy, perhaps we've reconnected with one of our first loves, our Commonwealth friends around the world. And, I think that's really important because the horizon that we were looking to was just, I think, for the last 50 years, that little bit too low. We were looking only really at the EU. And it's absolutely right that we lift our eyes beyond that horizon to a whole world out there, many of whom were friends much before our membership of the EU. And so in that context, it was great to be able to know that we'd shaken hands, as it were, on this deal. It covers trade worth £2.3 billion. So whilst, of course, Simon is right to say we are adopting an and rather than an or approach to trade, we still want to have a great relationship with the EU. We have the best deal the EU has ever done with anyone. They've never before done a zero quota, zero tariff deal with anyone. So, we want to have a good trade relationship with them, but we want to go beyond. And so, in anyone's book, £2.3 billion is a decent amount of money. And being able to make trade easier in the years ahead, to grow that further, is phenomenal. And I'm confident it's set to grow. I think British exporters, through the preferential access that they will get to the New Zealand market, will be used immediately. I think people will really want to seize that opportunity. It's a market that's expected to grow some 30% by 2030. There's really positive economic prospects in New Zealand. And, I think this trade deal, actually, it's one of many, right, that we want to secure. It's one of the first that we've secured. Australia and New Zealand are the first two brand new deals that we have pushed forward with, but we're also seeking to join the TPP, CPTPP as others call it. It depends which country you're in. That to viewers, that's a free trade area. It's not a bloc, unlike the EU. And this is a free trade area that allows you to trade with anyone else around the world, but have preferential access amongst the members of the area. And that is an area with a GDP of something like £8.4 trillion. So a phenomenal group. And this FTA with New Zealand, I think, supports that Indo-Pacific tilt. It cements relationships with a key friend, a key ally, and it builds on, of course, the work that we already do together through the WTO, through Five Eyes and so on. So we're already close partners. We've got shared values. We have a shared belief, I think, in the importance of free and fair trade. We both have committed to very high quality outcomes in this deal, particularly in areas like climate change and the environment, which is front of mind for so many, if not everyone, right now in the aftermath of COP26. But it also goes into areas like digital trade, where both countries are real thought leaders. And that, of course, is powering that economic growth that we both want to see in both our countries in the years ahead.
I think, Simon, it'd be great to hear from, again, your perspective and New Zealand in general with regards to the UK-New Zealand trade deal. It was obviously quite well covered here, well discussed, incredibly well received. I don't think you'll find very few people that were not happy with that trade deal. What was it like in New Zealand? Was there a positive reaction to the deal?
That's absolutely true in New Zealand as well. And we are so small, a minnow to your whale, but you know, if I look at the little coverage I saw in the United Kingdom, well, the headline was cheaper Sauvignon Blanc, and that's a great thing, by the way. And I hope everyone on this call will enjoy that. The best Sauvignon Blanc in the world, herbaceous and fruity and subtle and all the things that it should be. I would say in New Zealand, as the most remote developed country in the world, and a very small country at that, I think most New Zealanders do get, wherever they are on the political, well, mostly, I wouldn't say wherever, but mostly wherever they are on the political spectrum, the very high importance of free trade, because we do have to be outward looking. That's how we make our living. And as a former Prime Minister that I worked under, John Key, said, you know, you won't get rich without it. So New Zealanders get this. And the very exciting thing about this deal is it's not just a deal for the sake of it, it's very high quality. It's 97% of tariffs gone on day one. It's not just actually in the goods, although the goods, whether it's honey, wine, horticulture, it's very big in my region. We're the home of kiwi fruit, Ranil. So when you enjoy a kiwi fruit, I hope you do, they're very good for you. They come from where I live. It's also services. It's something very important in New Zealand. More movement, more working holidays, more professional service agreements, and some of these are SME compliance reduction. So these are really, really important things. Just a couple of other brief comments. I think it is worth noting, and this will be something perhaps some in the UK, although I do see one or two old friends on this call who are expat New Zealanders. It is worth noting, you know, this in a sense is back to the future for New Zealand. And we wouldn't want to go entirely back, but if you go back to 1973, when Britain, and I hate to dredge up old things, but 1973, when Britain joined the EU, Britain accounted for 50% of New Zealand's trade, actually all trade, but fundamentally goods trade. It was probably, in fact, no, it was certainly a good thing for New Zealand in a way to have that relationship with mum or dad broken at a level. It meant that we looked outward to Asia and Australia, and they're now very big trading partners. As Ranil says, it's an and. But it is good, in a sense, to come back to the UK, have this high quality agreement. New Zealanders love the UK. It's a really exciting thing. Final point, Ranil, it's TPP to me, it always will be. I've actually already this morning been on television with, from the Labour Party, a former trade minister, still a minister in the current Labour government, David Parker. And it's very humorous because he is in opposition. Labour would be out there holding signs protesting TPP. When he was in government as trade minister, he added a CP at the front and suddenly it was okay to sign it. So it's a very curious thing. I think it's highly desirable that the UK enters the CPTPP. This agreement is but a small part, but helps you to do that or enables at a level. While I'm on a roll, I really hope as well, after the UK does, we might even see the United States come into it. So I think that's a very important thing as well. But we would love to see you in the TPP or CPTPP, take your pick.
I think, you know, we're guilty of it sometimes on this platform. You know, we often talk a lot about trade, and you know, it is so important. But I want to discuss the potential that New Zealand and UK has outside of just trade. Ranil and Simon, you've both mentioned, you know, the shared, the values, the history, belief in democracy. How else can the two countries build closer ties? You touched on it a bit there, Ranil, with the sort of Nine Eyes agreement. So I think the question for both of you is, how can we build sort of closer ties outside of just trade?
Well, Yeah, look, so Five Eyes clearly is a really important part of the relationship. It's only one part, but it's an important part because clearly we are like-minded countries. We want to preserve the rules-based system. We want to keep our people and indeed the world safe. I think that's in everyone's interest to do that. And so where we can work together with like-minded friends, including New Zealand, that's of course a great thing. But I think, and it's related to trade, but it goes beyond trade as well. There are things that we can do to improve the connections between our peoples. And so, it's great that as part of this deal, we have agreed commitments on mobility that will make it easier for British professionals to work in New Zealand, and indeed also allow British companies to bring British talent with them when they set up in New Zealand. And I think these sorts of things are really important to allow people who are wanting to contribute to each other's economies to be able to do that and strengthen those real ties between our people. I think that's a very important thing that we must do as well. Clearly, a big challenge right now for everyone, and you'll be unsurprised to hear me say this, is of course, when we talk about rules-based trade, the issues that we see in relation to China. Now, of course, China remains an important trading partner for Britain and for most countries. And I think there is, of course, considerable scope for mutually beneficial trade and investment. And Prime Minister Boris Johnson rightly said that on Wednesday, yesterday. So much happens in the day. It's quite something. Anyway, so of course that is true. But our approach to China must be rooted in our values and in our interests. So whilst we want a positive relationship with China, we mustn't sacrifice our values in doing that, which is why we must also work with our friends to seek to uphold the rules-based system in whatever forum we find ourselves. And clearly at the WTO, which is my front of mind, but there are other fora as well, it is absolutely right that like-minded nations like the United Kingdom and New Zealand work together. And I'm confident that work will go from strength to strength as we continue to deepen these relations, which highlight how important it is that we continue to do so.
Simon, what your sort of take on that sort of UK New Zealand relationship outside of just trade?
Well, trade, of course, is fundamental. I've made that point. They used to call our Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Trade the equivalent of your Foreign Service, the Ministry of Fonterra and Trade. Fonterra is the large dairy company in New Zealand, and there was a sense that was all that mattered. Of course it's not, and I think the UK New Zealand FTA is a signifier, if you like, or a light to where things can go, but much more broadly than trade. Of course, as you both noted, already there's Five Eyes, there's huge people-to-people and cultural contact, given our shared history and values. And Ranil's done a good job of talking about some of those in the context of the WTO, China, and the like, where I fundamentally share his view. I think we can go even deeper, and I believe the vast majority of New Zealanders would share that view. I mean, if we're thinking about foreign policy, if we're thinking militarily, yes, there are relationships, but I look, and this isn't a universally held view in New Zealand, but I look at AUKUS that has recently been penned between Britain, Australia, and the United States. I look at the Quad military arrangement between, India, Japan, Australia, and the United States. Of course, Britain's not in that one either, but these sort of bodies or agreements that are broader, much broader than trade, are about strategic relationships. I think there's room for that between New Zealand and Britain, whether it's joining those sort of things together whether it's new ones entirely. I think that's really important. I think the other thing I would say, and Kanzuk, if you like, a sister body to this great one, they are hot on the people mobility issue. And some would say it's unrealistic to expect that Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Britain will get to a completely free position. And I don't know. I do think, though, if you don't have some aspiration in these things, you'll never kind of even get half the way. And I appreciate, I don't want to create a diplomatic incident here. I appreciate immigration in every country, New Zealand included, is sometimes a touchy subject. But I do think that people to people issue is also important, and we made progress in this FTA. There's room to do even more, actually, between like-minded countries. That would be good for both countries, actually.
Hey, Ranil, you touched on it there, on the sort of the China kind of conundrum, if you like. We've had quite a few different members of Parliament from the Conservative Party and Simon's National Party, and I think the general sort of consensus that we've kind of had is the importance to diversify our sort of portfolio, which is what I think the Commonwealth has the fantastic potential to do. And it's been great to see some of the National Party in New Zealand who have been, questioned some of the actions of the CCP, and it's good to see that Boris Johnson and our government here has done likewise similar. Do you see, of course, New Zealand and China, they're completely different countries, different dynamics, but do you see countries like New Zealand, Australia, India, probably more closer in terms of comparisons, potentially offering that opportunity to diversify our portfolios a bit more and giving us a bit more of a scope to whether it be in trade or in other sort of cooperative ways? Do you see these kind of countries as that opportunity?
Absolutely. When the pandemic hit, and within a few days really of me becoming a minister, I was told that from that moment I would be responsible for what we call Project Defend in the UK. And I know there's a bit of confusion. Is this a protectionist maneuver from the UK or what? And actually it was the opposite. It was, how can we go out to the world and source products from more countries than we'd done ever before? And it's to exactly the point you raised, which is, how can we diversify? We have been far too, and I think this is for most countries, China remains an important trading partner, as I say, but I would contend perhaps we have been too reliant on China alone to provide us with so many of the goods that we need to keep our countries moving, indeed for the supply chains for our businesses to make things themselves as well. And whilst I'm certainly not advocating we stop importing everything from China, that isn't what we are saying. We don't think that would be in anyone's interests. I think actually the power of trade is a great tool that we should all use to work with other countries around the world and to spread the British values that I hold, New Zealand values that Simon holds, which I think are probably very aligned. We should be doing that, and trade, I think, is an excellent way that we can do so. But diversification was critical. And so if you talk about latex gloves, for example, we've all had to have PPE during COVID. All the latex gloves in the world at that moment in time were being made in either China or Malaysia. That was it. And in fact, the vast majority were in China. Compared to Malaysia, a huge proportion in China. So if there had been an event that stopped China making gloves, we wouldn't be able to get any latex gloves at all. And that's not a sensible way to run things. So we discovered, I think, that the just-in-time production sort of method that had been fine in good years actually didn't work when there was one blip. wherever it was in the cycle. And so we've seen that with COVID, we've seen that with containers being in the wrong places, we've seen it with fires at the factories. There's the factory fire in Japan, for example, on microchips, which has stopped sort of automotive in so many factories from actually producing anything. So it's not just China that we've been reliant on, but I think in large part it has been. But generally, there's not been that resilience built in. And I think the more trade agreements that countries have, the more strong relationships countries have with like-minded friends, the more certain we can all be that when I was about to say something else, but when there is a crisis, then we can find a way through. And if you look at rare earths and so on, again, we are too dependent on too few states around the world for that, and that's going to power the next industrial revolution, isn't it? The move to cleaner technologies of the future is going to be powered by electricity, not internal combustion engines and so on. And so we've got to make sure we've got resilience of supply and all sorts of things, not just consumer goods, but throughout the supply chain, raw materials as well. So I totally agree that must be a principle. But the Commonwealth more generally, I think, is a great force for good as well. And China obviously has a huge population which powers its economy. Great. I'm all for people prospering through capitalism. This is a good thing. Actually, we should want the Commonwealth to do the same. And the Commonwealth is home to 1/3 of the world's population and half of the globe's top 20 emerging cities. So in terms of people and the ability to prosper in the years ahead, I think Commonwealth countries are absolutely up there. 60% of the Commonwealth population is under 30. I mean, this is a force for good, I think, in the world. And it's not only going to be a force for good in terms of values, but a force for good, I think, in terms of economics. It's important that like-minded countries, Britain, New Zealand, and others, continue to work together, as I say, to make sure that we've got the rules-based system upheld. Because when the rules aren't followed, then you end up with market failure, you end up with market distortions, and then you end up with people saying, well, let's raise barriers to protect domestic industry. And the only people who benefit from barriers to trade are the vested interests and governments who collect taxes. The consumers don't benefit at all, the people of our country, and we are elected to serve the people. This is the people's government led by Boris Johnson. And, we are here to make sure that people get lower prices, more choice, and end up with higher wages in their back pocket as well. And we're not going to do that through protectionism. We're going to do that through economic growth. We're going to do that through being more open with our friends around the world. And in fact, export-led businesses selling things around the world, not just buying things from around the world, which is of course right and proper, but selling things around the world. Export-led businesses are not only more profitable, but also pay their workers something like 7% more on average. So it's good news for everyone. And I think the Commonwealth really has a role to play in that.
I think I thought I was the person probably with the most Commonwealth stats, but I think Ranil may be beating me there and showing me up today.
Very good.
But Simon, I want to, I think, touch on China for New Zealand, because I think for us in the UK, and I think Ranil touched on it really well there, where, we have that capacity to diversify our portfolio, and we are doing, and it's great to see. For New Zealand, you could argue in some ways it's harder, and we've seen, the China New Zealand's reliance on China is quite clear, and it's quite strong. How do you go about changing that and sort of opening up to the rest of the globe? I know it's obviously a very different economy to the UK, and different populations, different dynamics. But is that something that you think is possible for New Zealand, and how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, let me say you beat me to the punch there, Sunil. I wanted to commend Ranil on his discussion on the Commonwealth. I agree with everything he said, and I'm going to borrow some of those statistics. They're very, very good. If I was being cheeky, I would say, fundamentally, India makes those statistics, but that's a good thing, right? And that's fantastic. I also agree, Ranil, with your discussion on protectionism. And I would just say on that, in a COVID-19 world at a level and post COVID-19, it's been somewhat concerning. I don't have anywhere near the expertise that you have in your portfolio with that. I've never been a trade minister. That we have seen at a level of growth and protectionism around the world. And again, just for a second, the UK New Zealand FTA is a great beacon or signifier against that free trade is still the way to go. Look, when it comes to China and some of the concerns there, Sunil, I think you've had my brother-in-law Simon O'Connor, member of Parliament, on, and we keep it in the family in politics in New Zealand. Ranil, that's the way it goes. And he's got very forthright views on these things that I suspect you would both agree with. To give you a very brief history lesson again, when we left the EU, or Ranil, when the UK rather entered the EU, New Zealand struggled in a trading sense for quite some time. It really was only the early 2000s and a push into the Asia Pacific, and specifically China, that New Zealand's economy really thrived. And so you're unlikely to hear a New Zealand economy say that, a politician, I should say that that's a bad thing. China is our largest trading partner, bar none. A few years ago, it overtook Australia, which, by the way, has grown exponentially. It's an incredibly integrated economy, really, or set of but between Australia and New Zealand. At one level, economically, if not politically, it is one market and one economic system. That's perhaps going too far, but that's the case there. So China is big. Regardless, though, of your views on China, and we can, I think, all agree about the human rights issues, some of those trade issues that Ranil has talked about, regardless of that, whether you're a Sinophile or an absolute skeptic through to hostile, it's never a good idea to have all of your eggs in one basket. And I think we can all agree, and we probably, with the exception of the Green Party in New Zealand, can agree that we want more trade with more. The Commonwealth provides opportunity, the Asia Pacific provides opportunity. Taking the CPTPP global with the likes of the UK entering it provides opportunity. I want to just give a, I suppose, in a way, a similar example to the one Ranil has given around the latex gloves. So same but different. In New Zealand, very recently, in the last number of weeks, and there hasn't been anywhere near enough coverage of it, actually, a refinery, our only refinery, has, as a refinery at least, shut. And that is because on the commercials of that, it doesn't quite work. I worry about that for the same reasons Ranil fundamentally worries about the latex gloves or the rare earths. That actually, in an uncertain, increasingly, dare I say it, dangerous world, countries, nations do need to have these strategic assets. I wouldn't have thought that several years ago, when I would have said, no, you know what, just let the market decide these things. But Australian cousins, they at a level do, in terms of government, prop up a small number of refineries. And I think there's a case for that in New Zealand, because we don't just want to be reliant on Asia for our refined petroleum. We want to be able to do that in New Zealand as well. So it's interesting times. China is a huge part today in New Zealand's economic story. Whilst I, in New Zealand terms, have concerns about China more than many a politician here, on the whole, I agree with most New Zealand politicians that that China story for New Zealand has been a very, very good one. Diversification, though, is really important. And this UK FTA helps us with that. An EU one would help us with that. CPT is a big part of that, particularly if the USA comes on board.
I think it's fascinating as we talk about sort of the changes to the globe and trade and where we're moving towards. And I think it's almost impossible for us not to talk about a post-COVID economy. It's been much discussed in the UK, and I'm sure it's in the same in New Zealand. I wanted to get your sort of both your thoughts on what you kind of envisage that looking like for the UK and New Zealand separately, because naturally there's obviously the last 18 months, 2 years, there's been some stark changes and growths within industries. I mean, we didn't expect, declines in some, so we probably didn't expect either. How do you see that impacting the future?
Shall I go first on that, since we're taking this in turns? And yeah, I mean, clearly it's created huge impacts in so many areas. Just on the one reflection on the Commonwealth before we move on, which just come to mind as well, is not only is there huge population growth and a very young population in India, but also Africa. And that also has the interplay with the relationships with China and so on as well. So there are so many different factors all interwoven that we must all be very mindful of. And in our own respective countries, we must act to the best interest of our people, and that's all that most people, whatever party, dare I say, go into politics to do. You know, in terms of China as a trading force, it will remain a significant trading force. And anyone who tries to say, well, we just won't trade with China, is not only reducing their ability to influence the change that I think we all would want to see, but also is disadvantaging their own people in the process. And so I agree with Simon in saying, you know, for New Zealand and for many countries around the world, including the UK, trade with China has been good for people, but we do that in a clear-eyed way. And we certainly don't have any plans to negotiate a deal with China, a trade deal with China. So that's worth saying for viewers who might be asking that question. In respect of post-COVID, I think you've got a real shift and a real interest in people moving to cleaner, greener technologies and finding ways to trade worldwide in all sorts of new forward-leaning goods and services. I think the fact that people didn't go to their offices or their, in some cases, you know, other workplaces, whether that be factories, shops, and so on, for many months, did change the way people look at their own lives. You see a lot of people have moved, in the UK's case, moved out of London, decided to leave London and set up home outside of London, wanting a different pace of life, a different you know, view out their window than they had before. And that's leading to people, for example, traveling less. We're also seeing the adoption of new technologies like this that have been great enablers in people not only needing to commute less to the office in their own country, but travel around the world less. We're doing this, you know, on a video call. But before the COVID pandemic, the best that most people had was a spider phone on a meeting table that they could dial into and wait for a beep to hear who had joined. Now we're able to do this virtually in this way. It's fantastic. Who had heard of Zoom before COVID? You know, I wish I had. That would have been an excellent investment opportunity. But sadly, I missed that one. And so we've seen a lot of areas spring up that perhaps weren't even thought of before. And in terms of the green trade, coming back to where I was starting, you know, I think green trade has an enormous role to play, not only in the post-COVID economy for economic reasons, but actually also in a way of demonstrating that the private sector, individual businesses and trade actually have a role to play in cleaning up our world. And I don't think we say often enough that the private sector is a huge force for good. That too often there is an assumption by much of the press and Twitter and Facebook that if there is a problem, government must solve it. And we saw with COVID, the vaccines, it wasn't government that fixed this problem with vaccines in a government laboratory somewhere tucked away in Dorset. It was the private sector coming with innovation in different ways, finding a way through. And we've got different approaches from different businesses, whether that's mRNA or a more traditional vaccine from Valneva, the French company. All sorts of different private sector businesses around the world have found a way through, and we should salute businesses for what they've done. And we should also recognize that businesses are the people who are going to be able to take the clean recovery forward. So in Britain, to enable that, to create the environment for that, it was actually before COVID that we were the first major economy to pass in legislation that we're going to reach net zero by 2050. And that created a real signal to say, look, we are serious about this. We want businesses to look more in this area. I think businesses have responded. We're seeing many of our big businesses say, right, how do we, instead of pumping oil and gas, how do we invest in renewable technologies, whether that's offshore wind or there's some pilots on tidal energy. We're both blessed, both of our countries are blessed with coastline and tributaries and so on. We also know that some of our businesses are looking worldwide to sell their technologies to other countries. We don't have guaranteed sun, but other countries do, and solar energy in some countries might be better than wind. And so we're devising those technologies, and there's a lot of effort, a lot of R&D going in to say, how can we get the most effective renewable energy solutions all around the world? And that's great business, but it's also transforming, I think, the climate change conversation, which is keeping 1.5 alive, but it's also really important for the economic growth of our country, creating those sorts of jobs that I think people want to see. Government has a role to create that environment, as I say. We've committed international climate finance to something like £11 billion to support all sorts of projects in all sorts of countries. UK Export Finance, which is our export credit agency, they've also put something like £2 billion worth out of direct lending to finance clean growth projects. We are serious about supporting businesses, but that's exactly it. We want to support businesses in doing that. And at the WTO, I think we can support businesses as well in this area. We can create the right environment worldwide. And we're an active participant in the WTO forum on environmental sustainability. And we think we can harness the power of that group to increase international cooperation and discussion in that area and progress, I think, what is probably true, without wanting to speak for Simon, I'll let Simon speak in a moment. I appreciate I sometimes ramble. Progress what I think are our shared green trade priorities. But perhaps I'll pass the floor to Simon.
Well, Ranil, I love your discussion about the harnessing of the private sector's power, whether it's in green tech or other areas. I think we need to bottle it and let many drink from it. It's great. I think trying to understand what the COVID world, or I hope the post-COVID world, looks like is somewhat difficult from little old New Zealand. And my worry here actually is that we do, referring back to what Ranil said about the private sector, we do run the danger of descending into government-led, big flabby government decisions and ways of doing things and funding, rather than letting the private sector go at it. My thesis would be on New Zealand. We just think about that for a second, that it's been somewhat insular and complacent when it comes to these issues. It's comparison with your relative freedom are now less free. My wife and I, my wife's family in the UK can't get back there till I think at least April, May, when things will start to open up. And that, is a regrettable thing, it seems to me. If you think about the New Zealand economy, it's really got three parts to it. It's very simplistic, but politicians like simple. Or certainly I do. Primary production, tourism, and if you want to call it the creative economy, services, movies, ICT, tech, many things in that area. An irony of COVID-19 has been, in my view, that it's forced a somewhat anti-farming party back to farming. It is today, with tourism in the absolute, I was going to say doldrums, but effectively a position of dormancy in New Zealand. Farming has picked up the slack, and fortunately in that area, record high prices globally for those little kiwi fruit we've talked about, for the Sauvignon Blanc, for the meat, and various other products and services, high quality products and services in New Zealand. But our opportunity lies in getting back into that high tech, into entertainment, into the clean technology issues that Ranil's talked about. Can I just say I'm very sad by the fact that Britain has stolen the Amazon Lord of the Rings production from us. For a little economy like New Zealand, that's worth billions of dollars. That's percentage points in GDP. But as they say, kudos to you. And it shows, what a dynamic economy and what increasing powerhouse the United Kingdom is when it comes to entertainment. New Zealand's traditionally done quite a lot in that area, and these are opportunities for us again, if we've got the right settings and the right encouragements in place.
It's funny you mentioned the Lord of the Rings production. I think I was mentioned to you, Simon. It's actually come to my little town in Maidenhead. Yeah, that was quite surprising to see. Before we move on to the final topic, I wanted, Simon, you kind of touched on it there in terms of the role of government. In the UK, I think, well, across the globe, I think we saw pretty much most governments got bigger, to obviously more powers in terms of COVID. We've been quite fortunate in the sense, well, I guess the three of us probably have similar sort of views on our sort of political standing in terms of probably smaller governments. And we've been really good in the sense of seeing our government has reduced its powers pretty swiftly. It's gone to, a sort of a traditional conservative kind of mind frame of smaller government. Is that similar in New Zealand? Because obviously it's a different party, different dynamic, different philosophy, or is it still quite big governments we're seeing in New Zealand?
Oh, it's big government and huge spending. I would argue in a pretty undisciplined sort of a way. And investment in good things that are productive and that are going to get us somewhere is one thing, but yeah, it's been a real cash splash, and that's been a steroid injection into an economy. But I do think it creates long-term issues. This week in New Zealand's little parliament, but I think, what is it, third or fourth oldest democracy and democratic parliament continuously running in the world. We've passed some highly draconian laws that allow for open-ended powers, effectively by ministerial fiat, not even in the statute themselves, around things like vaccine mandates, government decision making around what can and can't open, and the like. And that is a real concern. I think if you went back a few months, I would have been in a lot of trouble for saying what I'm sort of about to say, because there would have been a very real sense in New Zealand that and a smugness, dare I say it, that we'd got things on COVID incredibly right. We still have very low fatalities. I mean, I think it's 30 or something, very low. And the reason for that has been very restrictive settings. But now with Delta, in my little city, for example, those COVID numbers are going up and up, but we still have the very restrictive settings. And here's the what would have been controversial, but I don't think is so controversial now. I look at the UK and say, yeah, you actually got not everything perfect, but a lot right. And you are now in a relatively freer world where you can go to the pub, you can go to the movies, you can do all of these things. And yeah, that is food for thought. My party in New Zealand has a view of, you know what, get the vaccination rates high, and we have in New Zealand, it's at 80-something%. I believe I'm right to say higher than the United Kingdom now, and it's good news. That's happened very quickly, but actually it's time to open up because the downsides of not doing so are now significantly higher than the upsides.
It's always great and always fascinating to hear what's going on in New Zealand. It's obviously not something that's covered in great detail in sort of British general media, so it's always good to get an insight what's going on there. I'm going to finish off, I suppose, in the most positive way we can, and talk about the Commonwealth. You've both been great in mentioning the Commonwealth today throughout this Zoom session. I saw some closing thoughts generally on the Commonwealth, and I suppose if you'd like, the UK-New Zealand relationship and where you think that will go in the next few years.
Well, should I start it off so that it's not poor Ranil who has to always kind of extemporaneous it give the view without the benefit of some thought. Not that it's been very high quality though, I should say. And you take the golden star. I'm also going to say, Ranil, for the best Commonwealth comments on this, and I'm not about to outdo you. You know, I think there's possibly been a view in New Zealand, I can't speak with credibility about in the United Kingdom, that the Commonwealth, well, that might sound it's a bit old-fashioned. You know, we think of Rudyard Kipling, who's probably been cancelled by now, and so on and so forth, and that's the Commonwealth. But I think, you know, certainly amongst the political class, if there's such a thing, I think the better view, the more accurate view, and a growing view, is that actually it has the ability to be a very modern, a dynamic, geographical people, but also more than that concept, if you like, or way of thinking. And I'm excited about that. You know, as I say, Ranil said it best, but Africa, India, much of Asia, of course, the English-speaking colonies, if you like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa. It has legs, as we might say in New Zealand. It has the ability to really go somewhere. That's nascent, but I think we can grow that and really do something. In terms of what that looks like, I would just say what I suppose I've already said, and I'm sure you agree with, but, you know, trade is one part of that. It's very important because, yeah, we've got to earn a living in this world of ours. But I would like to see it pushed into other wider areas, the strategic stuff that matters in this uncertain, increasingly dangerous world, but more positively, the people movements, the ability to as Ranil has talked about, have investments in New Zealand, which brings workers in with great skills, which would be a good thing for New Zealand. And, who knows, possibly vice versa with companies, New Zealand companies like Xero, a great software as a service company that now has, I think, its second or third biggest headquarters in the UK, and will be employing a lot of Brits, but also, some Kiwis. So that to me is the future of it. Closer, deeper, not exclusive, but closer and deeper.
Well, I couldn't have put it better myself. I think closer and deeper really does sum up where we can go. I think trade has an important part, but it is, as Simon says, not the only element of the relationship and the way we can deepen it in the years ahead. Clearly, I've already said, how important the Commonwealth can be, not only in terms of people and economic growth, which is why we are absolutely committed to working with our friends and allies across the Commonwealth, wherever they might be, to remove those unnecessary barriers to free and fair trade and strengthening the trading relationships. But also, we've touched on today that diversification that we can really be able to secure from Commonwealth friends towards that greener, more resilient economy through greener and more resilient global supply chains, as well as we recover from COVID. And that's really important to us. We really do believe that the Commonwealth has stood the test of time because it has moved with the times, and it is a wonderful, I refer to it as a brotherhood, a group of people around the world who all have so much in common with each other. And we might live our own lives in our own countries, but we can also come together and work together for the common good. And I think that is just so important. Clearly, getting through COVID, it's been difficult to bring us together, and CHOGM, we hope we'll be able to get CHOGM to take place in the not too distant future. And we at the moment happen to be chair in office until the next CHOGM takes place, so we look forward to working on that. But there are other things at a smaller subset level of the Commonwealth that remain important too. And clearly, as part of the Indo-Pacific tilt that we have set out in our integrated review, as the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has rightly and repeatedly said, that the world is moving in that direction. It's absolutely right that we should look to work with our friends in this part of the world. And one of the objectives of CANZUK is increased defence cooperation. Simon's already raised AUKUS today, but there are other programs already that make sure that the armies, for example, of Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, and I think the United States, work together. And these are the sorts of programs. Although the US isn't a Commonwealth member, I think perhaps we can give them a sort of a cousin relationship to the brotherhood of Commonwealth members. It's absolutely right. We should work with our friends, our brothers, to make sure we're keeping the world a safer place. Again, we talked earlier, I talked earlier, forgive me, of the need to make sure that we don't put up barriers to trade, because the only people that benefit from barriers are governments and certain vested interests. And, again, people do not benefit from instability in the world. So the more safe our world is, and we have a role to make that the case, the better off our people will be, the more our economies will be able to prosper, the more jobs we'll be able to create, the more wealth we'll be able to create. And in turn, hopefully, the safer our world will be again. So that is, I think, an objective that we must all continue to take forward alongside, I think, the economic driver that I think we all agree on. But it's been a great pleasure to have the chance to speak with you, Simon, and you, Ranil, today. And I very much hope, as I said at the beginning, that we'll continue to take these discussions forward which I believe are really important in our political discourse. When there is just so much negativity so often about all the things that are going wrong in the world, pretending that there is some great playbook from which we should all refer to in fighting COVID, which of course there is not. Actually, there is so much that we should celebrate as positivity that we should have at this time, where we have overcome this great challenge, where we are even despite COVID doing so many great other things as well. And I hope that we shall have many more discussions where we can highlight the positives for members of CFOC and indeed both of our respective parties, so that we know that actually the work continues, whatever and wherever we might be.
Well, I'm not sure. Normally at the end of these sort of Zoom sessions, I'll give a sort of positive message on the Commonwealth, but I'm not sure if I can really add much to what Simon and Ranil have said. And if there was ever any doubt if our patrons are committed to the Commonwealth, I think we've got two here that have shown that they very much are believers of the Commonwealth. Thank you both. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on our platform today. I've promised Simon when he comes to the UK next that we'll get him some pints of beer. So we'll make sure we'll make that happen. But thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to New Zealanders who have tuned in this morning, and thank you for the UK ones who spent their evening with us. And we hope to see you guys soon. We've got a number of different plans lined up for 2022. And we hope we can do more of these sessions via Zoom and physically in person.
Wonderful to see you both.